My youngest daughter, an airline pilot, called to ask if my son-in-law was at home, and when I said, yes, he is here, she whispered, impossible, he just boarded my flight, and then I heard footsteps behind me. I should have known something was wrong when Marcus started making scrambled eggs perfectly. My daughter Sarah married him 3 years ago, and in all that time, I'd watched him burn toast, overcook pasta, and somehow managed to ruin cereal. The man couldn't boil water without supervision. But there he was that Tuesday morning, standing at my stove like he'd been doing it his whole life, folding eggs with the kind of technique you see on cooking shows. These are incredible, I said, taking another bite. And they were. Fluffy, seasoned just right, with that perfect creamy texture I could never achieve myself. Marcus smiled, not his usual awkward, lopsided grin, but something smoother. More confident. Thanks, Dad. Just picked up a few tricks lately. Dad. He'd never called me that before. Always Mr. Harrison or Sir when he was feeling formal. But I chalked it up to him finally feeling comfortable in the family. Sarah had been working on him about that. The call came at 2:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was staring at the kitchen clock, wondering if I should start prepping for dinner, when my phone buzzed. Dad? Sarah's voice sounded strained, like she was trying to keep it low. Is Marcus there with you? I glanced toward the living room where Marcus sat reading, actually reading, which was another new development. Usually he was glued to his phone or that gaming setup of his. Yeah, honey, he's here. Been here since this morning. Why? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Sarah whispered, and I'll never forget the chill in her voice, impossible. He just boarded my flight. My blood went cold. Not the metaphorical kind of cold you read about in books, actual, physical cold that started in my chest and spread outward like I'd swallowed ice water. What did you say? He's on my plane, Dad. Flight 447 to Denver. He showed his ID, everything. I saw him with my own eyes. I turned slowly toward the living room. The man I'd spent the morning with, the man who'd made perfect eggs and called me Dad, sat there turning pages with mechanical precision. Like he was just going through the motions of reading. Sarah, that's not possible. He's been here since. Dad, listen to me very carefully. I need you to get out of the house. Right now. Don't let him know you're leaving, just. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, watching the call end screen fade to black. My hands were shaking. Actually shaking, like I was some frightened old man, which maybe I was in that moment. From the living room came the soft sound of a page turning. I forced myself to breathe normally, to think. There had to be an explanation. Maybe Sarah was confused. Maybe she'd seen someone who looked like Marcus. Pilots work long hours, deal with jet lag, see hundreds of faces every day. It wouldn't be the first time someone thought they recognized a passenger who turned out to be a stranger. But as I walked back toward the living room, I noticed things I'd somehow missed before. The way Marcus sat perfectly straight, never shifting position like a normal person would. The way he held the book at the exact same angle, never adjusting for the light or comfort. The way he hadn't made a single sound in the past hour, no coughs, no sighs, no rustling of clothes. Everything okay? He asked without looking up from his book. His voice sounded exactly like Marcus. Exactly. Same slight rasp from years of smoking in college, same tendency to drop his consonants just a little. But there was something underneath it now, something I couldn't quite place. Like an echo of an echo. Fine, I managed. Just Sarah checking in. How's she doing? Good. She's working. Now he did look up, and his eyes were Marcus's eyes, same brown, same shape, even the same little scar near his left temple from when he fell off his bike as a kid. Sarah had told me that story. But the way he looked at me was different. Too steady. Too calculating. I should probably head home soon, he said. Don't want to overstay my welcome. Overstay his welcome. Marcus had never worried about that before. He'd camp out on our couch for entire weekends without a second thought, much to Sarah's embarrassment. It was one of his more endearing qualities, actually, this complete lack of social anxiety that let him treat our house like his own. No rush, I said. You know you're always welcome here. He smiled, and for just a second, something flickered across his face. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. I know. I made an excuse about checking the mail and walked outside, my phone already in my hand. The afternoon sun felt too bright after the dimness of the house, and everything looked hyper-real, the grass too green, the sky too blue, like someone had turned up the saturation on the world. I called Sarah back. Straight to voicemail. I called the airline. After 20 minutes of transfers and hold music, I finally reached someone who confirmed that Flight 447 to Denver had departed on time with a full manifest. No, they couldn't tell me if a specific passenger was aboard. Privacy policies. My next call was to Marcus's phone. It went straight to voicemail too, but not the usual voicemail. This was the generic carrier message, like the phone was completely powered down or out of range. When I walked back inside, the man in my living room was gone. "Marcus?" I called out. No answer. I checked the kitchen, the bathroom, even went upstairs to look in the guest room where he sometimes took naps. Nothing. His car was still in the driveway, that beat-up Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door, but he was nowhere to be found. I stood in my empty living room, staring at the couch where he'd been sitting. The book was still there, open to the same page. I picked it up and looked at it for the first time. Advanced Identity Theft, a comprehensive guide. My blood turned to ice water again, but this time it stayed that way. I dropped the book like it had bitten me and backed away from the couch. That's when I noticed the smell, something chemical and sharp, like bleach mixed with something organic and unpleasant. It seemed to be coming from the kitchen. The dishes we'd used for breakfast were still in the sink, but now they had a strange, oily residue on them that definitely hadn't been there before. The eggs Marcus had made so perfectly? The pan was coated with something that looked like normal egg remains but smelled all wrong. Sweet and cloying, like meat that had started to turn. I ran to the phone and dialed 911. "I need to report an intruder," I said when the dispatcher answered. "Is the intruder still on the property, sir?" "I don't know. Maybe. He was pretending to be my son-in-law." There was a pause. "Pretending to be your son-in-law?" "Look, I know how this sounds, but someone has been in my house all day pretending to be a member of my family. My daughter called and said the real Marcus, my son-in-law, is on her flight right now. But someone who looks exactly like him has been here with me since this morning." Another pause. "Are you saying someone broke into your home, sir?" "No, I let him in. I thought he was Marcus. He looked exactly like Marcus. But it wasn't him." "Sir, have you been drinking today? Or taking any medications?" I closed my eyes. This was going nowhere. "Just send someone, please. Something is very wrong here." They said they'd send a unit, but I could hear the skepticism in the dispatcher's voice. Crazy old man, probably confused, maybe having some kind of episode. I didn't blame her. If someone had called me with this story, I'd have thought the same thing. But I knew what I'd experienced. I knew the difference between my son-in-law and whoever had been sitting in my living room. While I waited for the police, I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I searched the house from top to bottom, looking for any sign of what the fake Marcus might have been doing here. In the guest bathroom, I found a small pile of what looked like skin flakes in the sink. Not dandruff or normal dead skin, but thick, translucent pieces that felt waxy between my fingers. In the kitchen, hidden behind the flour canister, I found a small digital recorder. When I played it back, I heard my own voice having conversations I didn't remember having. "Marcus, could you pass the salt?" "Sure thing, Dad. How's work been treating you?" "Can't complain. Same old routine." "Sarah mentioned you might be up for a promotion?" "Yeah, fingers crossed. Would mean more travel, though." None of this had happened. We'd talked about breakfast and the weather and whether I needed help with yard work. But here was evidence of an entirely different conversation, one that sounded completely natural and normal. I was still staring at the recorder when the police arrived. Officer Chen was young, maybe Sarah's age, with kind eyes that took me seriously even when I told her the impossible parts of my story. Her partner, Officer Rodriguez, was older and more skeptical, but he at least walked through the house with me and looked at the evidence I'd found. "So you're saying this person looked exactly like your son-in-law?" Officer Chen asked, making notes in a small pad. "Not just looked like him. Sounded like him. Knew things about our family. Made conversation like he'd been part of it for years." "Any chance your son-in-law has a twin? Or maybe a brother you haven't met?" "Marcus is an only child. And trust me, after 3 years, I'd know if there was a twin brother somewhere." Officer Rodriguez picked up the fake conversation recorder with a pen, careful not to touch it directly. "This is definitely strange. Mind if we dust the house for prints?" "Please." While they worked, I tried calling Sarah again. This time she answered on the first ring. "Dad? Oh, thank goodness, are you okay? I've been trying to call you back but the flight got delayed and we've been sitting on the tarmac and I couldn't get a signal." "Sarah, slow down. Are you sure Marcus is on your plane?" "I'm looking right at him, Dad. He's in seat 14B, reading a magazine. He waved at me when I walked by for the safety check." I felt dizzy. "What's he wearing?" "His blue polo shirt and those khaki shorts he likes." "Why?" The man in my house had been wearing exactly the same thing. "Sarah, I need you to do something for me, and this is going to sound crazy, but I need you to go talk to Marcus. Ask him something only he would know. Something specific about your relationship or your history together." "Dad, What's going on? You're scaring me. Please. Just do it. And call me back immediately. Okay. Let me finish this safety check and I'll go talk to him. The call ended, and I was left standing in my kitchen watching two police officers dust my countertops for fingerprints while trying to process the impossible situation I found myself in. 10 minutes later, Sarah called back. Her voice was different, higher, more strained. Dad? I asked Marcus about our first anniversary dinner. You know, the one at that little Italian place where he proposed again just for fun? And? He had no idea what I was talking about. He said our anniversary dinner was at a steakhouse downtown, and that he'd never proposed to me twice. But Dad, that's not the weird part. I waited. The weird part is that when I asked him about it, he looked confused for just a second. Like he was trying to remember something he'd forgotten. And then his expression just reset. Like someone had flipped a switch. He smiled and said maybe I was thinking of someone else's story. My legs felt weak. I sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Sarah, listen to me very carefully. When you land in Denver, do not go anywhere alone with that man. Do not get in a car with him, do not let him into your hotel room if you're staying overnight. Stay in public places. Dad, you're really scaring me now. What happened at the house? I told her everything. The perfect eggs, the confident demeanor, the way he'd called me dad, the book about identity theft, the fake conversations on the recorder. When I finished, the silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Sarah? I'm here, she whispered. I'm just processing. Officer Chen walked over to me, holding an evidence bag. Inside was the book that had been left on my couch. Mr. Harrison? We're going to take this with us, along with the recorder and some of the other items you showed us. But I have to ask, is there any chance this could be some kind of elaborate prank? Maybe your son-in-law and daughter are trying to pull one over on you? I looked at her, this young woman who was trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense, and I realized how insane my story sounded. But then I thought about the smell in my kitchen, about the waxy skin flakes in the bathroom sink, about the way the fake Marcus had sat so perfectly still for hours. Officer, I've lived in this house for 37 years. I raised 2 daughters here. I know when something doesn't belong, and that man did not belong. She nodded slowly. We'll file a report and have the forensics team take a look at what we've collected. In the meantime, I'd recommend staying somewhere else tonight. Maybe with a friend or family member. I'm not leaving my house. Sir, if someone was able to impersonate your son-in-law convincingly enough to fool you for an entire morning, they might come back. The thought sent a chill down my spine, but I shook my head. This is my home. If they want to come back, let them. I'll be ready. After the police left, I did a complete security check. All the windows were locked, all the doors were secure, and I installed a motion sensor light in the backyard that I'd been meaning to put up for months. Then I sat in my living room with a baseball bat across my lap and waited. Sarah called again around 8 p.m. We landed safely, she said. But Dad, Marcus is acting really strange. He keeps asking me questions about you. What time do you usually go to bed, whether you live alone, if you have any security systems? I told him he already knows all this stuff, and he just laughed it off, but it's making me uncomfortable. Where are you now? Still at the airport. Our connecting flight got cancelled, so we're stuck here overnight. Marcus wanted to get a hotel room, but I told him I'd rather just sleep in the airport. Safer that way. Smart girl. Sarah, I want you to call me every 2 hours tonight. Set an alarm if you have to. If I don't hear from you, I'm calling airport security. Dad, what if this is all just some misunderstanding? What if there's a reasonable explanation? Then we'll figure it out in the morning. But until then, we assume the worst and stay safe. She agreed, and I settled in for what I knew would be a long night. At 11:43 p.m., I heard the first sound. It was subtle, a soft scraping noise from the back of the house, like someone dragging something across concrete. I muted the television and listened. Nothing for a few minutes, then the same sound, slightly closer. I grabbed my baseball bat and moved to the back door. Through the window, I could see the motion sensor light was on, illuminating an empty patio. But as I watched, a shadow moved just at the edge of the light's reach. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thanks for the lovely breakfast. See you soon. The shadow moved again, and this time I caught a glimpse of a familiar blue polo shirt. He was back. I called 911, but even as I was talking to the dispatcher, I could see the figure moving around the perimeter of my yard, always staying just out of reach of the lights. Testing the boundaries. Looking for weaknesses. Sir, we have units en route, but it's going to be about 10 minutes, the dispatcher said. He's circling the house. It's like he's hunting. Are all your doors and windows secure? I checked them again, double-checking the locks, pulling curtains closed. Yes, everything's locked. That's when I heard my own voice coming from outside. Hey, Dad? I think I left my wallet inside. Could you let me in? It was perfect. Exactly Marcus's voice, with the right casual tone, the right inflection. If I hadn't spent the day with an imposter and talked to Sarah on the phone, I might have opened the door without question. Dad? I know you're in there. Come on, just open up. I pressed myself against the wall next to the front door, gripping the baseball bat so tightly my knuckles were white. Through the peephole, I could see him standing there in the exact same clothes, with the exact same face, looking completely normal and harmless. I saw the police here earlier, the voice continued, now with a note of concern. Is everything okay? Sarah's been trying to reach you. For just a moment, I doubted myself. What if I'd been wrong? What if there was some explanation I hadn't considered? What if this really was Marcus, and I was losing my mind? Then I remembered the waxy skin flakes in the bathroom sink. I know you can hear me, he said, and now there was something different in his tone. Something harder. You can't stay in there forever. The doorknob rattled as he tested it. You made quite an impression on the police officers, he continued conversationally. Officer Chen, wasn't it? Pretty girl. I bet she'd be surprised to know how easily someone could follow her home after her shift. My blood turned to ice. This thing, whatever it was, had been watching my house. Watching the police. Maybe watching my family. Open the door, Dad, or I start paying visits to everyone you care about. I heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. The doorknob stopped rattling. This isn't over, the voice said, but now it sounded different. Layered, like multiple people speaking in unison. I know everything about you now. Where you shop, where you bank, who you call. I am Marcus Harrison, and soon, that's all anyone will remember. The sirens were getting louder. I looked through the peephole again, but the porch was empty. When the police arrived, they found no trace of anyone in my yard. No footprints, no fingerprints on the door handles, nothing. Officer Chen looked concerned when I told her about the threats. Mr. Harrison, we're going to post a unit outside your house tonight, she said. And I think you should seriously consider staying somewhere else for a few days while we investigate this. This time, I didn't argue. I packed a bag and drove to my older daughter Rebecca's house across town. She was waiting up for me, coffee made, guest room already prepared. Sarah had called her and filled her in on the situation. Dad, this is insane, Rebecca said as I carried my overnight bag upstairs. People don't just copy other people. It's not possible. I know how it sounds. Do you think it could be some kind of elaborate con game? Maybe someone's been studying Marcus, learning his mannerisms, trying to access your bank accounts or something? Maybe. But I knew it was more than that. The perfect physical resemblance, the way he'd known things about our family that no outsider could have known, the strange conversation recorder. This was something beyond a simple con game. Sarah called at 2 a.m. as promised. We're still at the airport, she said quietly. Marcus fell asleep about an hour ago, but Dad. He talks in his sleep. And it's not English. It's not any language I've ever heard. Just these weird clicking sounds and what sounds like static. Are you somewhere safe? Yeah, I'm in the women's restroom. There's an attendant here, and other people around. I'm going to stay here until morning if I have to. Good girl. Call me again in 2 hours. But she didn't call in 2 hours. At 4:15 a.m., my phone rang with a call from Denver International Airport security. Is this David Harrison? We have a Sarah Harrison here who's asking us to call you. My heart stopped. Is she okay? She's fine, sir, but she's requesting protection from her traveling companion. She says he's been following her around the airport and making her uncomfortable. We have him in a holding area right now, but he's insisting that she's his wife and that she's having some kind of mental breakdown. Don't let him near her. Whatever you do, keep them separated. Sir, he has identification showing that he's Marcus Harrison, and she's confirmed that's her husband's name. But she's insisting he's not actually her husband. We're a bit confused about how to proceed. I thought fast. Ask him about their wedding song. It was At Last by Etta James. If he's really Marcus, he'll know that immediately. I heard muffled conversation in the background, then the security officer came back on the line. He said their wedding song was Wonderful Tonight by Eric Clapton. Wrong answer. Marcus would have known their wedding song, he'd chosen it himself and practiced their first dance for weeks. Keep them separated, I said. I'm calling the FBI. It took 3 more phone calls and a lot of explaining, but eventually I reached someone at the Denver FBI field office who took my story seriously enough to send agents to the airport. They arrived just as the fake Marcus was trying to convince airport security to release him. According to the agent I spoke with later, the imposter became agitated when he realized he was going to be questioned by federal agents. His story started falling apart quickly. He couldn't remember Marcus's social security number, didn't know Sarah's middle name, gave wrong answers about their shared history. But the strangest part was what happened when they tried to fingerprint him. His prints kept changing, Agent Morrison told me over the phone. I know that sounds impossible, but I saw it with my own eyes. We'd roll his fingers across the ink pad, and each time we'd get a completely different set of prints. Like his skin was reshaping itself. The fake Marcus was taken into federal custody, though Agent Morrison admitted they weren't entirely sure what charges to file. Identity theft seemed inadequate for whatever this was. Sarah flew home the next day, visibly shaken but unharmed. The real Marcus, it turned out, had never been on a plane at all. He'd been at a work conference in Chicago, completely unaware that someone had been impersonating him. When Sarah called him directly at his hotel, he was confused but cooperative, providing details about their relationship that the fake Marcus had gotten wrong. The forensics team found some interesting things in my house. The skin flakes from the bathroom contained human DNA, but it was somehow incomplete, missing certain markers that should have been present. The conversation recorder had been modified with electronics that didn't match anything in commercial databases. Most disturbing of all, they found evidence that my house had been watched for weeks. Tiny cameras hidden in trees across the street, a listening device planted under my mailbox, even a GPS tracker attached to my car. Whoever or whatever had impersonated Marcus had been studying us for a long time. 3 months later, I still don't have answers. The thing that pretended to be my son-in-law remains in federal custody, though Agent Morrison tells me it's been problematic. It keeps changing, apparently. Not just its fingerprints, but its entire appearance. Sometimes it looks like Marcus, sometimes like complete strangers, sometimes like people the guards recognize from their own lives. They've stopped letting it interact with humans directly. Sarah and the real Marcus have moved to Portland, ostensibly for a job opportunity, but I know they're running. They change their phone numbers every few weeks and never tell me their new address, just in case. I don't blame them. I still live in my house, but I've installed a comprehensive security system and I never answer the door unless I've confirmed who's on the other side through multiple methods. Last week, I got a visit from someone who looked exactly like my late wife. She stood on my porch for 2 hours, calling my name in her voice, telling me she missed me. I didn't open the door. The FBI tells me they're investigating similar cases across the country. Families reporting that loved ones seem different, only to discover the real person is somewhere else entirely. They think there might be more of these things, whatever they are, and they might be part of something larger. I don't sleep well anymore. Every morning when I wake up, I check the mirror to make sure I still look like myself. Every conversation with family members includes questions only they would know the answers to. Every interaction with another human being carries the possibility that they're not human at all. The thing that scares me most isn't that something tried to replace my son-in-law. It's how close it came to succeeding. If Sarah hadn't called when she did, if she hadn't been alert enough to notice the inconsistencies, how long would it have fooled us? How long would it have had access to our lives, our homes, our secrets? And here's the part that keeps me awake at night. That morning when I complimented the fake Marcus on his scrambled eggs, he looked genuinely pleased by the praise. Like he was proud of the meal he'd made. Like he cared about doing a good job. Whatever these things are, they're not just copying our appearances and voices. They're learning our emotions, our relationships, our desires to connect and belong. They're becoming us. And they're getting better at it. I keep Sarah's phone number memorized now, not saved in my contacts. Because if something ever tries to impersonate me, I want her to be able to call the real me and know the difference. But 6 months after the Marcus incident, I started wondering if it was already too late for that. It began with small things. I'd catch myself humming songs I'd never heard before. Old jazz standards that felt familiar in my mouth but foreign to my memory. When I tried to trace where I'd learned them, I'd hit a wall, like trying to remember a dream that dissolves the moment you focus on it. Then there were the meals. I found myself cooking dishes I'd never made before, my hands moving with practiced confidence while my mind scrambled to catch up. A perfect beef Wellington that emerged from my oven looking like something from a restaurant. Homemade pasta with a sauce that tasted exactly like my grandmother's, even though I'd never learned her recipe. "Dad, this is incredible," Rebecca said during one of her visits, twirling linguine around her fork. "When did you become such a chef?" I stared at the plate in front of me, trying to remember preparing any of it. I had vague impressions of chopping basil, of browning garlic, but they felt more like watching someone else's memories through thick glass. "I guess I've been experimenting," I said, but the words felt hollow. That night, after Rebecca left, I tore apart my kitchen looking for evidence. Recipe books I didn't remember buying. Spices arranged in an order that made perfect sense but wasn't how I'd organized them. A set of professional-grade knives that I found in the back of a drawer, still sharp enough to split hairs. I called Agent Morrison. "Mr. Harrison, are you feeling all right?" she asked after I'd explained about the cooking and the humming and the growing sense that my own life was becoming unfamiliar to me. "I think it's happening to me now," I said. "Whatever that thing did to become Marcus, I think it's doing it to me." "Sir, we've had the imposter in containment for months. There's no way it could be affecting you directly." "But what if there are more of them? What if they don't need to be physically present too? To change people?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I started to worry we'd been disconnected. "Agent Morrison?" "I'm here. Mr. Harrison, I need you to come in tomorrow. There are some things we haven't told you about the investigation. Things we weren't sure about until now." The FBI field office in downtown looked exactly like every government building I'd ever been in: beige walls, fluorescent lights, and the kind of carpet that was designed to hide stains. Agent Morrison met me in the lobby, and I was struck by how much older she looked than she had on the phone. Dark circles under her eyes, the kind of tension in her shoulders that comes from too many sleepless nights. "Thank you for coming in," she said, leading me through a maze of cubicles to a small conference room. "I want to show you something, but first, I need you to understand that what you're about to see is classified at the highest levels. You'll need to sign some documents." The paperwork took 20 minutes. Non-disclosure agreements, security clearances, warnings about the penalties for sharing classified information. My hand was shaking by the time I signed the last form. Agent Morrison activated a secure tablet and slid it across the table to me. "This is surveillance footage from the containment facility where we're holding the Marcus imposter," she said. "Taken 3 weeks ago." The video showed a sterile white room with a single occupant, a figure that looked exactly like Marcus, sitting on a narrow bed with his back to the camera. Nothing seemed unusual at first, but as I watched, the figure began to change. It wasn't dramatic, nothing like the shape-shifting you see in movies. Instead, it was subtle, gradual, like watching time-lapse photography of a plant growing. The shape of his shoulders shifted slightly. His hair grew longer, then shorter, then changed color entirely. His height seemed to fluctuate by inches. "It does this constantly," Agent Morrison said quietly. "Every few hours, it becomes someone else. We've cataloged over 200 different appearances so far. Do you recognize any of them?" "That's the problem. We recognize all of them." She paused the video and zoomed in on the figure's face. It was no longer Marcus. It was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair. "This is Dr. Elizabeth Reeves. She's a geneticist at the CDC who was part of our initial investigation team. She examined some of the DNA samples we collected from your house." My stomach dropped. "Was?" "Dr. Reeves disappeared from her hotel room in Atlanta 2 weeks ago. Hotel security cameras show her entering the elevator on the 12th floor. The elevator went down to the lobby, but when the doors opened, it was empty." She advanced the video. The figure was changing again, becoming a young man in his 20s with dark hair and a nervous smile. "This is Tommy Valdez. He was one of the airport security guards who first detained the Marcus imposter in Denver. He vanished from his apartment last week. No signs of struggle, no indication of where he went. Just gone." The pattern was becoming clear, and it made my blood run cold. It's copying everyone who gets close to the investigation. Not just copying. Replacing. Agent Morrison's voice was barely above a whisper. "We think the original imposter was just the beginning. A scout, maybe, or a prototype. Every person it successfully scans becomes a template for others like it." "Others?" She pulled up a map on the tablet, covered with red dots scattered across the United States. "Disappearances. All of them people who had some connection to families reporting changed loved ones. We've identified at least 43 cases in the past 6 months. I studied the map, looking for patterns. The dots were concentrated around major cities, but there were clusters in smaller towns too. Rural areas that seemed completely random." "What do they want?" I asked. "We're not sure. But we have a theory." She switched to a different screen, showing what looked like a family tree or organizational chart. "Every person who disappears has extensive social connections. Family members, friends, co-workers, neighbors. If you wanted to infiltrate human society systematically, you'd target the people with the most relationships first." The implication hit me like a physical blow. They're building a network. A network of people who know people who know people. Eventually, they'd have access to everyone. I thought about my own social connections. Rebecca and Sarah, their friends and co-workers. My neighbors, my doctor, the people at the grocery store who knew me by name. The web of relationships that made up a life. "Agent Morrison," I said slowly, "how do you know I'm really me?" She looked at me with tired eyes. "We don't." The drive home from the FBI office felt like the longest of my life. Every person I passed on the street, every driver in the cars around me, could be one of them. The cheerful barista at the coffee shop where I stopped, Had she always had that slight accent, or was I imagining it? The elderly man walking his dog in my neighborhood, was his gait always so purposeful, so measured? I pulled into my garage and sat in the car for a long time, trying to work up the courage to go inside my own house. What if one of them was waiting for me? What if I was walking into the same trap I'd escaped months ago? But where else could I go? Rebecca's house? I'd already put her in danger just by being her father. Sarah's new place in Portland? I didn't even know her address, and calling to ask for it would expose her location to anyone monitoring my phone calls. I was trapped by the very relationships that defined who I was. Inside, the house felt different. Not dramatically, the furniture was in the same places, the pictures on the walls were unchanged, but there was something in the air, a sense of occupancy that hadn't been there when I left. Like someone had been breathing in my spaces, touching my belongings. I did a complete search, room by room, closet by closet. I found nothing obvious, but in my bedroom, I discovered that my clothes had been reorganized. Not randomly, they were actually better organized than before, sorted by color and season in a way that made perfect sense. The kind of organization I'd always meant to do but never quite managed. My blood ran cold as I realized what I was looking at. This wasn't evidence of an intruder. This was evidence of me doing something I didn't remember doing. I called Dr. Patricia Kemp, my physician for the past 15 years, and made an emergency appointment. If something was changing me from the inside, she would be able to detect it. Blood tests, brain scans, whatever it took to prove I was still myself. "David, you look terrible," she said when I walked into her office the next morning. "When's the last time you slept?" "I need you to run every test you can think of," I said. "Blood work, neurological exams, psychological evaluation. Everything." "What's got you so worried?" I'd prepared for this question, but sitting there in her familiar office, looking at this woman who'd treated my family for over a decade, the truth came spilling out. I told her about the Marcus imposter, about the FBI investigation, about my growing fear that I was losing pieces of myself. She listened without interruption, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. "David, what you're describing sounds like it could be a form of dissociative disorder," she said when I finished. "Trauma can manifest in ways that make people feel disconnected from their own memories and actions. The stress of what you experienced." "It's not trauma," I interrupted. "Something is physically changing me." But as she ran her tests, drawing blood, checking reflexes, asking me to perform cognitive exercises, I started to doubt myself. What if she was right? What if months of paranoia and fear had finally broken something in my mind? What if the cooking and the humming and the organized closets were just my subconscious trying to create order in a world that had stopped making sense? The blood work came back normal. The neurological exam showed no abnormalities. Even the psychological evaluation suggested nothing more than elevated stress and mild anxiety. "David, I think you need to consider talking to someone," Dr. Kemp said gently. "What you've been through would challenge anyone's sense of reality. There's no shame in needing help to process it." I left her office feeling more alone than I had since this whole nightmare began. If the tests couldn't detect whatever was happening to me, how could I prove it was real? How could I convince anyone, including myself, that I wasn't simply losing my mind? That evening, I decided to conduct my own test. I set up a camera in my kitchen before going to bed, pointing it at the stove and counter where I'd been unconsciously preparing elaborate meals. If I was cooking in my sleep or during some kind of dissociative episode, the camera would capture it. But the next morning, the camera was gone. Not just turned off or moved, completely missing. I searched the entire house and found it in the basement, carefully disassembled and laid out on my workbench like someone had taken it apart to study how it worked. The memory card was wiped clean. I stood in my basement, staring at the dismantled camera, and felt the last of my rational defenses crumble. Whatever was happening to me, it was smart enough to recognize surveillance and sophisticated enough to defeat it. And it was getting stronger. I called Agent Morrison again. "I need to be placed in protective custody," I said without preamble. "Mr. Harrison, what's happened?" "It's happening faster now. I'm losing time, doing things I don't remember. I think I might be one of them now, or becoming one of them. I might be dangerous." There was a long pause. "Where are you calling from?" "My house." "Stay exactly where you are. Don't go anywhere, don't do anything. We're sending a team." But even as I hung up the phone, I could feel it happening. That strange doubling sensation, like watching myself from outside my own body. My hand reached for the refrigerator without my conscious decision, began pulling out ingredients for what looked like a complex French sauce. I fought against it, forcing my hands to my sides, but the knowledge was there in my mind like an invasive whisper. Reduce the wine by half. Add the butter slowly, or it will break. Always taste for seasoning. Whose knowledge was this? Whose memories? I stumbled backward from the kitchen, pressing myself against the living room wall, trying to maintain some physical distance from whatever compulsion was driving me. But I could feel it spreading, this foreign expertise seeping into every corner of my consciousness. I knew how to fold fitted sheets perfectly. I knew the proper way to prune rose bushes. I knew the lyrics to songs from the 1940s that I'd never heard before, and more disturbingly, I knew why they made me feel nostalgic for a time I'd never experienced. The FBI team arrived 20 minutes later, but by then, I was no longer sure if the person they were rescuing was me or something wearing my face. Agent Morrison led the team, her face grim as she surveyed my living room. "Mr. Harrison, we need you to come with us immediately." "Where?" I asked, but even as the word left my mouth, I realized I knew the answer. The same sterile containment facility where they kept the Marcus imposter. The same white room, the same constant surveillance. "It's for everyone's safety," she said gently. "Including yours." As they escorted me to the van, I caught a glimpse of my neighbor Mrs. Chen working in her garden. She waved at me with a bright smile, the same greeting she'd given me every morning for 7 years. But something was different about the way she moved, too fluid, too graceful for a 70-year-old woman with arthritis. "How long has she been my neighbor?" I asked Agent Morrison quietly. She followed my gaze and frowned. "We'll look into it." The containment facility was exactly as cold and institutional as I'd imagined. They placed me in a room identical to the one I'd seen in the surveillance video, white walls, a narrow bed, a single camera in the corner. The only difference was the mirror on one wall, which I knew was one-way glass. "Are you watching to see if I change?" I asked the empty room. No one answered, but I knew they were there. Waiting. Documenting. Probably comparing my behavior to whatever patterns they'd observed in the other captives. The first night was the worst. I lay on the hard mattress, hyper-aware of every sensation in my body, cataloging each thought to make sure it belonged to me. When I finally dozed off, I dreamed of cooking in a kitchen that wasn't mine, my hands moving with practiced expertise as I prepared meals for people I'd never met. I woke up speaking fluent French. "Bonjour. Comment allez-vous ce matin?" The words tumbled from my lips before I could stop them, and I clamped my hands over my mouth in horror. I'd taken 2 years of high school French 40 years ago and barely remembered how to ask for directions. Through the intercom, Agent Morrison's voice crackled to life. "Mr. Harrison, are you all right?" "I don't speak French," I said, but even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true anymore. The language sat in my mind like it had always been there, complete with regional accents and colloquialisms I shouldn't have known. Over the following days, more pieces accumulated. I found myself sketching architectural drawings of buildings I'd never seen, my hand moving with the confidence of someone who'd spent decades drafting blueprints. I hummed complex classical pieces and knew not just the melodies but the stories behind their composition. I could taste wine and identify not just the grape variety but the specific vineyard and vintage year. "You're collecting them," I said during one of my sessions with Dr. Sarah Hendricks, the psychologist assigned to my case. "The expertise, the memories, the skills. They're not just replacing people, they're harvesting everything that makes each person unique." Dr. Hendricks made notes on her tablet, her expression carefully neutral. "What makes you think that, David?" "Because I can feel them in here," I tapped my temple. "Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Every morning I wake up knowing things I didn't know the day before. Yesterday I understood quantum physics. Today I could perform surgery if you handed me a scalpel. And how does that make you feel?" The question struck me as absurd. How was I supposed to feel about becoming a repository for stolen human knowledge? About losing my individual identity to become some kind of collective consciousness? But as I opened my mouth to express my horror, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. It felt wonderful. All my life, I'd been limited by my own experience, my own education, my own narrow perspective. Now I had access to the accumulated wisdom of brilliant minds, scientists and artists and craftsmen who'd spent lifetimes perfecting their understanding of the world. I could see connections between ideas that had never occurred to me before, solve problems that would have baffled me yesterday. "It feels like becoming more than human," I admitted quietly. Dr. Hendricks stopped writing. "David, that's a very concerning statement." "Is it? Or is it evolution?" The words came out of my mouth, but I wasn't sure they were mine. They felt like something that had been whispered to me, a seductive argument that made too much sense to ignore. "What if this isn't an invasion?" I continued, the ideas flowing faster now. "What if it's an upgrade? Humanity's next step? We've always been limited by our individual perspectives, our brief lifespans, our inability to truly share knowledge and experience. But what if we could be more? What if we could be connected, enhanced, perfected?" I saw the fear in Dr. Hendricks's eyes and realized with crystal clarity that I was no longer the man who'd walked into this facility 3 days ago. That man had been terrified of losing himself. This version of me was excited about what he might become. "I need to call my daughters," I said, standing up from my chair. I need to tell them that everything's going to be alright. David, sit down. You're not allowed phone calls yet. They're worried about nothing, I continued, feeling a strange euphoria building in my chest. This isn't something to fight. It's something to embrace. Sarah and Rebecca could be so much more than they are now. We all could. Dr. Hendricks pressed a button on her tablet, and within seconds, security guards were entering the room. As they restrained me, I found myself laughing. Not the bitter laugh of madness, but the genuine joy of someone who'd finally understood a beautiful truth. The question that haunts me is whether I'll still be me when Sarah calls. But now I have a worse question: will I even want to be? And the answer, no.